Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film Aftershock. Is a disaster film, and it stars and produced and is written by Eli Roth and is directed by Nicolas Lopez, who I've never really heard of before, but he's a Chilean director. It's about a group of three male friends who Eli Roth and these two other guys, and the two other guys are from Chile and live there, and Eli Roth is visiting. They're doing various tourist things until they meet up with this group of three ladies and go clubbing with them, and then the next day go do tourist stuff with them until that night when they're at a club, an earthquake hits, and they have to try to survive in Chile after this massive earthquake, and things keep getting crazier and crazier after that. Now, the cool thing about Aftershock, and I think what really distinguishes it from a lot of disaster films, is that Aftershock is a disaster movie but written by people who clearly write horror movies. Now, that's very obvious if you look at who wrote it, when it's like Eli Roth, but it has that sense to it, it has that feel to it, and it has a little more fun and disorganization, and it's kind of breaking genre. It's setting itself up at the beginning like a horror film. There's this one girl who knocks over a cleaning lady and she's instantly killed, like right when the earthquake happened. But then you think that cleaning lady, obviously she's good, she's a hardworking woman, she gets killed almost directly after. So it's kind of messing with your expectations. And that's certainly part of the fun, at least at the beginning, is that this film takes your expectations for what you expect from a disaster film and likes to mess with them. And there's no real hope of the human spirit or anything. It's not very hopeful about we can live on. It's very kind of dark and 70s. People kind of die at random. You're never sure exactly who's going to get killed and when. There's always surprises around the corner. It's messing with the genre a lot more than usually a Hollywood disaster film would. I think that's probably because it couldn't get the budget like a normal, like a 2012 or The Day After Tomorrow could, and have like a crazy sequence that costs millions and millions of dollars. Instead, they keep it small, but there's a lot of charm in that smallness. It's also, like most disaster films, it's not very well written, and while it's setting up all the characters at the beginning for like a half hour or something before the earthquake hits, it's kind of boring. The dialogue's pretty terrible, and the exposition is fairly paint by numbers. There's nothing that interesting about it before the earthquake happens. It's really, this film is all about the earthquake. I mean, it's called Aftershock, so of course it is. But Eli Roth is kind of playing in genre and being creative as a screenwriter, certainly, by making a disaster film like this, but he's not a great writer. You know, that's the problem, is like when you listen to this dialogue and you listen to how these people relate to each other and you look at these characters, they're flat two-dimensional characters. It can only soar so much because the character development we went through is so ordinary and so boring that you can't really, and you don't really, fall in love with these characters. It's harder to get into because of that. I like how it gets crazier and crazier and crazier and messes with your expectations, but because it keeps messing with your expectations, it becomes kind of predictable. And then it does what most Hollywood films do and has like too many plot points to a point where it's like, I'm just really out of this movie. I just felt like it went too far. It was like too much, and it should have kind of held back and stayed on this kind of simple, cool premise. And it did fairly well with it for the most part, and I think the gore and the lack of faith in humanity, which felt like a very 70s kind of film, is an interesting take for the disaster film genre, and it's definitely a breath of fresh air for that genre. Not a genre that's particularly good or great or anything, but it's nice to see this kind of a take, because most takes on disaster movies, they have to be big Hollywood films. And this is much darker and more sinister and has such a bleak view of humanity, whereas most of them, you know, at the end they have such hope in humanity. But this is very dark, has a lot of very dark humor. It is an interesting subvert on the genre, and they do succeed for the most part, but the end result of the film, when you get to the end of the film, it gets kind of old after a while. It's like they pushed it too far. You just think of how it's messing with your expectations, but it messes with them so much it becomes predictable. It's messing with a predictable disaster movie. It honestly becomes like a reverse image of one, and in itself is still predictable. So if you have seen Aftershock and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.